At Sriharikota, Vikram-1 rose from the launch pad and reached orbit. That made Skyroot Aerospace the first Indian private company to accomplish this with a privately developed rocket, moving commercial space reform from policy into flight. The Hyderabad-based company flew the rocket under Mission Aagaman. Vikram-1 carried small satellites into space, making this more than an engineering demonstration. It performed the basic work expected from an orbital launch service. The vehicle lifted off at 12:05 in the afternoon. That moment matters because a private Indian orbital rocket was no longer merely proposed, tested on the ground, or waiting for regulatory clearance. It was flying an operational mission. Vikram-1 used a 4-stage configuration during its maiden flight. Skyroot later declared the mission a grand success, saying the vehicle completed every planned phase from launch through the rest of its flight sequence. That remains the company's account of mission performance. But the central outcome is supported by the rocket reaching orbit, an achievement no privately developed Indian vehicle had recorded before this flight. The sequence covered 14 phases over 15.46 minutes. Why does that matter? Orbital flight demands a connected chain of events, so completing the mission meant coordinating far more than ignition and initial ascent. Before launch, Skyroot said Vikram-1 had undergone every ground test the company could perform. Its chief executive also acknowledged the remaining boundary. Real flight conditions would reveal what ground testing could not. That distinction is important for India's emerging private space industry. A successful first flight demonstrates capability under actual conditions, while the resulting flight data can shape how the vehicle and its operations develop from here. Mission Aagaman was Skyroot's second mission, but its first orbital attempt with Vikram-1. The company succeeded on that attempt, giving the private sector a powerful technical reference point rather than another future promise. The timing reflects a larger institutional change. Government reforms opened India's space ecosystem to private participation, creating the conditions for companies to move beyond supplying components and toward conducting their own missions. Vikram-1 now gives that policy shift a visible consequence. An orbital-class rocket, designed and developed entirely by a private Indian company, has completed its first flight, connecting regulatory opening with demonstrated private execution. Government institutions still remain part of the system. The launch occurred from the Satish Dhawan Space Center, while authorities issued airspace and maritime notifications and marked restricted areas along the ascent path and planned impact corridor. So private participation does not mean government disappears. It means responsibilities are being rearranged across company engineering, public launch infrastructure, and official safety coordination, with each layer necessary for an orbital mission to proceed. For other Indian space startups, the immediate signal is practical. A domestic private company has crossed the line from developing an orbital vehicle to flying one successfully, establishing a precedent inside the country's commercial space sector. For the government, the flight offers evidence that opening the sector can produce private orbital capability. It does not, by itself, establish how broadly that capability will spread across companies or how frequently missions can be repeated. The global implication is equally specific. Mission Aagaman signals India's entry into commercial launch through its private industry, placing an Indian startup within a market where customers ultimately require satellites delivered into space. But entry is not the same as sustained commercial performance. This maiden success proves an orbital flight was completed. The supplied evidence does not yet establish recurring launch cadence, production scale, or durable customer demand. Those boundaries matter because a launch business must convert engineering success into repeatable service. Vikram-1 has supplied the crucial first result, while subsequent missions will show whether that result becomes a dependable commercial capability. Viewers should therefore watch what follows the celebration. How Skyroot uses real flight learning, whether later vehicles reproduce this outcome, and how India's reformed space institutions support private missions while coordinating shared infrastructure and safety. Vikram-1 is a landmark because private Indian orbital capability has moved from design into demonstrated flight. What happens next will determine whether Mission Aagaman marks one historic arrival or the beginning of a lasting launch industry.